Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Today we're back with theater producer, director, and playwright, Robert Cacioppo. Thanks for joining us today, Robert.
Pleasure to be here again.
Pleasure to have you back. And today I want to discuss transitioning a book into a show. Now, I don't know if you've ever taken part in this, but for our authors and just their perspective, we want to get a little perspective from you on if I was an author trying to, transition my book into a show. So, what do you believe would be the key challenges in adapting something like a novel into a show?
Well, first of all, it's important that a play in general is going to be in the same location.
Mm,
Movies obviously can take you from a post office to driving in a car to changing a flat tire to being in a hotel room and so on. Uh, but plays need a single location. But again, not always. Sometimes something can be done extremely simply and where we use the audience's imagination. I mean, no one makes this clearer than William Shakespeare. Then all the shows are done on the same sort of set with staircases left and right, open areas. And, when they point out into the audience, says, there's the Castle Elsinore, then you're, in the middle of nowhere and they're pointing out to where they tell us where it is. Uh, I think
right.
the experience that I have experienced the most was a playwright that wants to adapt a book and not
Mm,
the opposite way. A friend of mine, Mark Shanahan, who is a Broadway actor. He was in 39 Steps on Broadway, and he directed for me several times. But he's entered in the world of playwriting, and a long time ago, like literally 10 years ago, he told me he had this idea to adapt this Agatha Christie book.
mm,
Agatha Christie, I believe her first successful book, which was called like The Murder of David Ackroyd. I believe that's the name. But it was tough. It took him literally 8, 10 years to get to the right person to have the support that he could get the Agatha Christie estate to approve his writing. And I think,
right.
I'm not an entertainment lawyer, but there is obviously you could adapt any Shakespeare play because he's been dead 400 years or
Right.
something. I mean, but Agatha Christie, whenever she died in the 60s, is still pertinent, and you can't do it. And Mark, in fact, just recently, I think through his connection with a very large theater in Dallas, in Houston, got the rights to do his adaptation of the mystery of or the murder of David Ackroyd. The other way around, I would say if I had a novel that I thought was special, and perhaps I even have an idea of it's taking place in one room or one location, and so on. I mean, could be a Stephen King novel, where about misery or something like that. You know,
Hmm.
but I think Stephen King adapts his own books into his own plays. I think he writes his own. But if you thought it would be, then I would think you'd try to seek out playwrights that have done that before. I mean, I would go to a Mark Saint Germain who took historical figures and maybe say, Mark, what do you think? Do you think you could write something like this? I think it would really be. They say in the theater that if you know 13 people, you know everyone. And I think that's a funny comment, but a true comment because our lives intersect so often. I was 22 years old directing a production of Hair, and six people in that cast went on to major Broadway careers. So we all know people, our roads cross. So it would really be to find a playwright that you respect, uh,
Right.
and 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 maybe you have a germ of an idea, but it probably is a very different talent to write a novel where you're describing all the emotions, where you really want to leave a lot to the actor who will give the emotion, to the set designer that may support it in some way, to the director who may know how to drive it. But I do think uh, that would be my advice if someone had a book uh, that they thought would be a play. But I certainly would advise before they did all the trouble of writing that play, as opposed to maybe creating a treatment and a synopsis of what you're going to do with it. Before going to the trouble, I would say go through the legal steps
Mm.
of getting the rights first, or getting the okay before you did all that work. But you know what? Sometimes plays get done. It is a play could easily be done 100 times. God knows there's probably was 5,000 productions of Odd Couple done in the world. So and if you're getting 8% of all of that, it could be hundreds of, and especially once you write it, you're done.
Right.
So what I mean. So you get your royalties, but I mean, obviously, there's agents involved and managers, but for the most part, because a lot of people don't know. Again, it's pretty much for a straight show 8%, and for a musical 12%. But I mean, a theater. I mean, even now, my theater's fairly small, and we're taking it $100,000 for every show, and so that would mean if I choose to do your play, that's $8,000, and this could be something you wrote 8 years ago. It's like,
Right.
great, I'm gonna get a check for $8,000. But in any case, if I had a novel, I would try to look for a playwright that I respect, and it's amazing. And they may be sitting there looking for a project and be happy to collaborate. Or was the opposite way, make
Mhm.
sure you get the legal, cross your T's and dot your I's for the legal element at first.
Yeah, well, I love that because I feel like you really put that into perspective. I would have one more question for you just to give our authors an idea of which parts of the book would really be modified and omitted. And I know that that depends on the story and the length of it, but just to give our authors kind of a real look on how much their book really has to be cut down to become a play, because I know sometimes they don't really realize that. I've talked to some authors that have interpreted their books into plays and they don't realize how much really has to get cut out. So, do you have any, realistic expectational advice that you could give them?
I hate to say, because I think it's horrible, it used to be that the attention span, I wouldn't say the American public, of the public in general, used to be that people could easily sit through a 3-act, 3-hour play, uh,
Mhm.
be happy to do that. And now I think it's sort of lousy that it's almost a selling point to say, "Oh, it's 90 minutes, no intermission." You know,
I
that
agree.
limited attention span. Uh, yeah, I mean, I would think. Or it's funny, interesting. Hitchcock felt that a great novel could never be a great movie. He
Mm,
always took short stories, or I mean, Psycho and North by North. They were never famous novels because he thought it could only be great in one medium. So often he took a lesser known story or book and made it a great movie. Now, the
mm,
only exception was when David Selznick said to Hitchcock, "I want you to do Rebecca, the great book Rebecca."
mhm.
And Rebecca is one of my favorite movies. And when you see it, it's amazing how true Hitchcock was to every word of that novel, to do that novel the way, we're talking about movie and not a play. But it is interesting. But it obviously has to be, I mean, trimmed to a meal sized portion.
Right, right,
You can't eat 4 meals at once. You have to eat one meal, one 90-minute or 2-hour version.
right.
But rules are meant to be broken. So sometimes, you can do a 3.5-hour play. There's a play on Broadway right now called Appropriate. That's absolutely brilliant. It's 3 hours long. and people are at the edge of their seats, riveted. So,
Well, Robert, thank you so much. That was great insight on transitioning a book to a show.
all right, thank you so much, and I love talking to you.
That's all the time we have for today. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to today's interview with theater producer, director, and playwright Robert Cacioppo. Be sure to check out our wishing you all a fulfilling and successful writing journey.